Last month, we took a look at why operators and owners are utilizing point-of-sale systems in their businesses. Now, in the second part of our three-part series, we are looking at key elements to consider when designing and laying out a point-of-sale system. You'll get recommended lane widths, curb heights, canopy information, and more as the International Carwash Association takes you to the cleaning edge. Don't miss next month's episode of The Cleaning Edge when we conclude our three-part series on point-of-sale systems with an in-depth look at self-serve applications. See you next time on The Cleaning Edge.
One of the first keys is trying to get the layout at the beginning of the wash to be smooth and efficient. And oftentimes the pay stations are one of the key elements as far as where you place those, one of the key elements in making that transition work properly and getting the cars to be able to flow from the street into the building and through in a timely and efficient manner. So where you place them is key, and a lot of operators are confused about where to put them. Their immediate reaction is to put them up close to the tunnel, as close as they can get. And that's a mistake in most cases. What we want to try to do is split the difference. We're trying to get a stacking on a 2-to-1 ratio.
Jim, you mentioned a 2-to-1 ratio in the design. What's the purpose behind the 2-to-1?
Good question. The purpose is to try to maximize the efficiency of the tunnel and to make sure that we're not missing rollers. The bottom line here is that you could potentially get two slow people at once, a guy on his cell phone, somebody dropped their wallet, and tie up the pay stations. If you don't have enough cars in between the pay stations and the tunnel, you're gonna run out of cars to produce there at the tunnel entrance. You're gonna be sitting waiting on these customers to catch up.
So the cars in the stack after they've paid, they become a buffer for any a customer error at the pay point. And so you would go down to maybe 2 people in the stack instead of 6, and then these guys finally finish their transaction, they pull through, and now your buffer zone's full again.
Exactly. You'll have an accordion effect. It'll expand and contract, and it'll catch back up. But the main thing is when you're real busy and trying to capture your peak volume, that you've got cars flowing through there, and you're never missing any rollers.
All right, Jim, we're standing in the pay lane. What are some of the design considerations that are critical in the pay lane itself?
Good question. One of the problems that we've seen is the pay lanes being too wide. What we want to do is narrow the width in the pay lane so the customer is actually forced up against the machine, and that way they're able to reach it and be able to use it effectively. Otherwise, they're going to be just too slow to be effective.
As you've been designing these through time, what have you guys come up with as the optimal width of the pay lanes?
Well, we went down to 9 feet and found we even do better at 8.5. So 8.5 feet is about where you want it. If you give the customer more room, the first-time user will pull farther away from the machine in order to avoid hitting it, and that's a mistake. We want to get them right up close to the machine so it's easy to use.
Okay, so now as you're forcing them to come to the left to be in a convenient position to access the machine, now you are putting the machine in jeopardy of being hit. So what do you do to prevent the vehicle from hitting the pay head?
Well, some of the things we do is the crash ballards are usually pretty standard with any island that we like to see. Okay, a lot of times we do a second rack right here, and we found a bar that comes out to the exact same width in the machine. Just keep the people's mirrors from clipping the machine.
As I travel around, I'm seeing these pay points are usually covered by a canopy. What are some of the reasons that people are putting these canopies up?
Well, there's a number of reasons. The most obvious one is going to be weather. You don't want snow if you're in a cold weather climate building up on the machines and making it difficult for the customers to use. The other thing is going to be sunlight. You want to try to minimize the glare. At different angles and different vehicles and stuff, you can't minimize or eliminate all of the glare, but you can definitely minimize it significantly. Next is going to be lighting. For most of your customers, and most of us know that the majority of customers at a car wash, over 50%, are women. Making it a nice, secure, well-lit area makes them feel a lot more comfortable pulling in and conducting a transaction out on the lot.
Okay, now aesthetically, you could put up an inexpensive canopy and you can handle those functions. But this particular canopy, and a lot of canopies I see, they pull in the elevations from the building. They create presence for the wash. Are people doing that because they're trying to draw attention to their entry point and trying to finish the look of the car wash?
Well, different guys have, I think, done it a little bit differently. Most of them are trying to tie in the canopy area with the rest of the look and the aesthetics of the facility, so it kind of merges together and blends nicely.
Okay, now what might be some things in the design of the canopy itself, besides what Jim just mentioned, that you want to remember, like infrastructure work or stuff that you have to be responsible for?
Yeah, we have a lot of, it always seems that whenever these things are done, there's always something that gets thought of after the fact. The latest additions are video cameras. Video cameras are becoming a big part of the express wash business. Just about every site being done now is being blanketed with video. And so remembering to have the conduit in for the video cameras to be added at a later time or at the same time is something that often gets forgotten. As well as the lighting. You know, a lot of people just simply forget to light up the inside of the canopy and remember the conduit for the lighting.
Okay, in terms of the video camera, what are some of the things that people are trying to capture in this area with video?
You want to capture, A, the transaction, okay? And then B, you want to capture the vehicle, okay, in its state during the transaction, okay? So we can look for damage on the vehicle while it's stopped and sitting there. Hopefully we can catch the vehicle license plates. We can catch anybody coming in trying to vandalize the machine at night, so you want to get this whole area coming and going from that standpoint. And then lastly, we do want to actually capture the transaction.
What are some of the reasons we're trying to capture the transaction itself?
Well, mainly because, you know, if we don't want a customer saying they put in a $20 bill and only got $1 back in change.
Okay.
You know, we can capture that in video. We can eliminate that right away. Customer saying they chose the most expensive wash, okay, and only received the lowest expensive wash. We have that ability all the way through.
So before we leave the pay lane, the last thing I just want to touch on is the curb height. You know, does an operator have to be concerned about the heights of the curbs to make sure that the heights of the machine is correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Standard construction is going to be a 6-inch curb height, but you definitely want to consult the manufacturer of whatever pay head that you're going to install, so that you can get the proper height, so that the pay head presents itself to the customer.
So Jim, in this model, where somebody is selecting the package themselves and then paying, the sign and the placement of the sign must be critical. Can you cover a few things that you advise people on regarding placement of the sign?
Sure, because if you get it wrong, it's going to slow down your volume. The sign has got to be before the pay head. Ideally, you'd like to place that sign in a position where the car in second position in stack behind the gate is going to be able to read it, but not the car who's sitting at the pay head. You don't want that customer tied up reading the menu sign when they should be interacting with the pay terminal and being on their way into the tunnel. So put the sign out a little bit. If you can get it out, get your curb a little bit of a distance out, that's where you want to put your sign.
Okay, now this sign's canted a little bit. Is that also just to kind of play to this lane, and then that sign's canted a little bit to the other lane?
Exactly, you're just playing a little bit to the lane.
But Dave, what are some of the things that you have to consider when you're setting the silent up to make sure that it's proper, the sign's placed properly and whatnot?
Well, two things. Number one, just to make sure that we can angle the sign and still be on the island, but the island sticks out far enough so we can fit the sign on the island. And second of all, we always seem to forget the crash bumpers. Okay, the ballards here are always usually placed before we come out to bolt in the sign, and so a lot of times they weren't considered, and guess what? They're right in the way where the sign's going to be. So plan on both this placement of the sign as well as the ballard before you finish your final designs.
In terms of power, this is a lit sign, so again, an issue of conduit runs if you're going to light your sign.
Yeah, these islands have several points of power. A, the signs, B, the pay heads themselves, and C, the gates.
Okay, can we talk next a little bit about some of the conduits you pull and the loop and the sequencing and some things you have to consider from an infrastructure standpoint before the concrete goes down?
Yeah,
sure.
In addition to what we just talked about, we got there's several loops that go along. By loops, what we're talking about is metal detectors that'll sit underneath the concrete or underneath the asphalt. Okay. A lot of times you're going to want to have one right here to pick up the machine itself. It senses that there's a car here. The machine can kick on automatically. Okay. B, you have to have a second one here or a second set. Okay, for the gates themselves. Okay. And what this is, this allows the cars to clear the gate before it allows the gate to close. The gate will be opened by the machine, but closed off this loop. And lastly, so if you got two islands now, you have a total of 4 loops so far. The last is what we call the merge loop. And this may vary slightly with as manufacturer to manufacturer. You have to consult the manufacturer of the machines to know exactly what you need. But the merge loop is placed where the cars go from 2 lanes or 3 lanes down to 1 lane before they enter the tunnel. And the theory behind, or the practice behind the merge loop, is that it does not allow cars to get out of stack or out of sequence with each other. And so the merge loop has to be placed in a spot where your curbing doesn't allow for one car to get around the car that was in front of them. So if this customer in lane 1 pulls forward and for some reason stops their car to put their money back in their pocket or to grab their cell phone, or for whatever reason, it doesn't allow this car to get around them and in front of them, then you're out of stack in the queue.